Hey everybody, it's another Friday and it's time to take a look at some more polls. We've got Michigan, Texas, another one in New York City. But we're going to start with a little bit in New England. And this is going to be the big news over the past week, although pretty much everybody saw this coming. We've got Scott Brown running for the U.S. Senate in New Hampshire. And you can see here, this is his fourth campaign. He's got two in Massachusetts, and this will be his second in the Granite State. So this is a good state to start in. We've got some UNH polling. Now, there's no head-to-head polling in the Senate just yet, but let's start here with Governor Kelly Ayotte. Her approval rating is not looking too bad. 53 approve, 41 disapprove. That's going to be 29 strongly approve, 22 strongly disapprove. And this is actually her highest approval rating since she got into office. Now, New Hampshire only has 2-year terms for governor. So with those approval ratings, only 40% say that she deserves to be reelected, 38 say she does not, 22% undecided. With independents, 32 say she deserves to be, 41 say she does not. So decent approval ratings, but it looks like people don't necessarily want to have that person run again. Now those are not bad numbers. I would expect Ayotte to run again because she just got in there. I think it more broadly reflects that a lot of people just are tired of politicians. They don't really want to see them run again and again. They mentioned that Tom Sherman, who was the nominee for the Dems at 22, he might be running again to challenge Ayotte. According to this, a lot of people have no idea who he is, and his approval rating is just 8%, 11 unfavorable. So it's early, anything could happen, but I would guess Ayotte is in a decent position for a second term. Now here's some favorables about the Senate candidates. Chris Pappas, the likely Dem nominee, is at 36 and 36, so he breaks even. With independents, he's at 25 favorable, 40 unfavorable, so he's underwater there. Not strong numbers, but what about Scott Brown? Well, he's just at 12% favorable, 38 unfavorable, and he's way underwater with independents, just 9 favorable, 49 unfavorable. Even Republicans barely like the guy, 24 favorable, 18 unfavorable. So it's definitely weak there for Brown. If he is the nominee, he's got his work cut out for him. However, he almost won back in 2014. And since then, he's had a lot more time in New Hampshire. So his connection to Massachusetts might be fading, but it's still going to be there at least a little bit. Plus, he's got previous losses. So Scott Brown is definitely the underdog so far in this race. Maybe former Governor Chris Sununu changes his mind. But for now, it looks like it's going to be Brown facing Pappas. So there's going to be an open seat in the 1st Congressional District. Here we've got some favorability ratings for 3 potential candidates. Maybe the most high profile here is going to be Stephanie Shaheen, daughter of Senator Jeanne Shaheen. So we could be looking at a Shaheen dynasty here. But even so, her favorables are only at 17 and at 32 unfavorable. So certainly a lot more question marks in that race. What about in the 2nd district? Does Democrat Maggie Goodlander deserve to be reelected? Only 32% say yeah. 38% say no. Even Democrats are only at 60%. Independents have 46% say she does not. Here's the favorability ratings for Goodlander and Lily Tong Williams, who she faced in 2024 in the general election. For Goodlander, it's 31 favorable, 36 unfavorable. For Tong Williams, 30 favorable, 33 unfavorable. So similar favorables. Maybe we'll get a rematch there. And then down here, we've got the poll methodology. And then under that is going to be the demographic breakdown. So it looks like we could be getting several candidates re-emerging in New Hampshire, trying to make another run at it. It should be exciting, but federally, Democrats have more success, Republicans have more success statewide. Now let's go to the next state. This is going to be Maine. Now there's several key races next year, Senate, Governor, but it's a little bit too early for head-to-head matchups. However, the lower tier race in the 2nd Congressional District, that one does have polling. That's the Northern District that has Blue Dog Democrat Jared Golden. He's not running statewide, he's going to run again in the House. And we also have former 2-term Republican Governor Paul LePage challenging Golden. In this, LePage actually leads Golden by 350 to 47. Golden is getting 97% of Democrats. Independents break for LePage 52 to 40, and Republicans are going for LePage with 91%. It was extremely close last time for Golden. Paul LePage is a little bit older, maybe he's a little bit more controversial, but that district is already pretty red for president. If that spills over into the U.S. House, this could be a rare pickup opportunity for the Republicans next year. So with these head-to-head results, what about the approval ratings? Well, Jared Golden is totally in the toilet. He's at 21% favorable, 36% unfavorable. With Democrats, he's only 11 positive at 31 to 20. With independents, he's close to even, 1 point underwater. And Republicans have him at 6% favorable, 47 unfavorable. So weak numbers there for Golden, but he's still competitive in the general election. Look at Paul LePage. He's at 43 favorable, 44 unfavorable. Of course, Democrats pretty much unanimously hate him, 91% unfavorable. It doesn't even say anything for the favorable. I assume that's 0. 0. So LePage is an interesting candidate. He ran for governor again in 22 and he lost to Janet Mills, and it wasn't even that close. So I kind of thought he might have been retired, but it looks like he has at least one more race in him. And then we could go down here and take a look at Governor Janet Mills' approval rating. She's at 55 approve, 44 disapprove. Now that's ticked up here since the previous couple of polls. Earlier in the year, she was just a little bit underwater. Then we've got the U.S. Senate election. Again, no head-to-head polling here, and we're not even totally sure who's exactly going to run. But incumbent Susan Collins, her favorables are even more in the toilet than any of these other candidates. Only 14% favorable, a huge 57 unfavorable. Independents just 8% favorable, 60 unfavorable. Now in Collins' last run in 2020, she also had weak favorables, but Republicans are kind of in a jam here, given how the state leans blue federally. Without Collins, they stand little chance, but with the more moderate Collins as their nominee, it looks like that's not helping her brand whatsoever here. She has abysmal numbers and could be defeated in a general election. Now obviously she's not going to only get 14% of the vote like her favorability, and the polling did absolutely underestimate her last time. But we're still waiting on a serious Democrat to challenge Collins, and that's assuming Collins is definitely going to run. So far, outside of governor, a lot of these politicians have weak approval ratings, but they still remain competitive in a general election. So let's look at a totally different state. Let's go to Texas. Here's some polling from Pulse Decision Science, and this is going to be for the U.S. Senate Republican primary. But let's look at the top line number. If it's Paxton against incumbent John Cornyn in a primary, Paxton leads 57 to 38, 5% undecided. Paxton leads with very and somewhat conservative voters. Cornyn is ahead with moderate or liberal Republicans. But basically Paxton is ahead with every one of these demographics. Does get close with female college-educated voters. So we've seen multiple polls now that show Paxton leading Cornyn. Cornyn has time to get it together, but if the election were held right now, looks like he would lose. Now there's also potential candidate Wesley Hunt. If he's in the mix, then Paxton is at 49, Cornyn 32, and Hunt 13. And the big thing with Hunt is that his name ID is much lower. Maybe he ends up being a strong candidate that bridges the two gaps. But for now, he's yet to declare and not much of a factor in this race, but we'll see what happens. Now, if we go down here, here's the favorability ratings for these candidates. Now, this is just with 806 likely Republican primary voters. Paxton is 70% favorable, 18 unfavorable. Cornyn, 53 favorable, 30 unfavorable. That actually still looks pretty good there for Cornyn. Hunt is 27 favorable, just 3 unfavorable. But again, you could see Hunt's name ID is much lower than the other two candidates. So that's what we've got here in Texas. Looks like Paxton has the advantage, but we'll see what happens. Now let's take a look at one from Michigan. This is going to be the Republican primary for U.S. Senate. This is going to be from First Principles Digital, and that's going to be conducted by Fabrizio. So a Republican pollster, but it's a Republican primary. Let's see if we can make it just a little bit bigger. Now, in the GOP primary, so far, Mike Rogers is the only official major candidate in the race. He barely lost in 24, but if he faces Congressman Bill Huizenga, who looks like he might jump into the race, Rogers is at 48, Huizenga 20, and undecided at 32. Rogers has a 60% favorable rating, only 10% unfavorable. 8% have not heard of him, but with Bill Huizenga, 42% have not heard of him. Kind of like what we just saw with Wesley Hunt in Texas. Once you get outside of their congressional district, it makes sense that people haven't really heard much about him. They also throw in Trump's favorable here. He's at 91 to 6. That's huge. So for right now, it looks like it's going to be Mike Rogers. Now, no new polls out here for the Dems, but that race is actually pretty much wide open. I've been expecting Dana Nessel to get into that race, but so far it hasn't happened. Right now, it looks like a battle between McMorrow and Stevens, but we'll see what happens. We've got one poll left. Let's go back to New York City. Now, this came out just after the primary on Tuesday. Now, Cuomo initially said he's not going to run in the general. Then apparently he changed his mind and he is. So let's see what this poll says. Now, this was conducted by the Honan Strategy Group. And if Cuomo stays in as an independent, both him and Mamdani are at 39%. That's with likely general election voters in a 5-way race. They also have Curtis Sliwa, Jim Walden, and incumbent Mayor Eric Adams is at 13. It's possible this poll single-handedly encouraged Cuomo to stay in the general election. Now down here it says they have Mamdani on the Democratic and Working Families Party line. Cuomo is an independent on his Fight and Deliver ballot line. And the remaining numbers here were Curtis Sliwa polling at 7% and Jim Walden, look at this, 0%. It's always funny to see somebody get 0. You'd like to think that almost anybody would have at least a tiny bit of support, or maybe somebody in the poll answered incorrectly, but nope, this guy is at 0. So like I said in the stream the other night during the primary, now that Mamdani is the nominee, there are more question marks for the general election. If establishment Democrats or the Republicans don't want Mamdani to win, there's going to have to be a huge effort to coalesce around one candidate. Now, Sliwa is the Republican, but the city is just too blue for him to seriously get elected. So then you're down to Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo. If they're both going to campaign and pull votes, then Mamdani is almost certain to win. But if it turns into more of a 1-to-1 race, then it's possible Mamdani ends up not winning. Now that's a big if, it's still totally unlikely. But it was also totally unlikely that Mamdani would beat Cuomo 2 or 3 months ago. So things could change. We'll have to see what happens over the next few weeks in this race. If Cuomo is not on the ballot, Mamdani leads Adams by 15 points. But if Adams drops out, then Cuomo actually leads Mamdani by 4. With Eric Adams' approval rating, 67% disapprove of his job performance. 75% agree that he's corrupt and should not run for re-election. Mamdani is at 48% unfavorable, 40 favorable, and somehow Cuomo is actually favorable at 56 to 43. In previous polls, I've seen him viewed very unfavorably, so I'm not sure what happened this time. So this is just a quick poll right after the primary. Again, we'll have to give it a few weeks and see what actually starts to take shape. If Cuomo were the nominee, then I would think this race would pretty much be over. But now there's a potential for a few more twists and turns. We'll see what happens. But that's a look at some polling in New Hampshire, Maine, Michigan, and New York City. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about any of the dynamics in any of these states? How about Scott Brown in New Hampshire, Ken Paxton in Texas, and what's going on here with Andrew Cuomo? Let me know what you think down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.